Hello, it's Thursday the 5th of August and welcome to Korea 24. I'm your host, Kwon Jang-ho. President Moon Jae-in has said that South Korea will aim to become the world's fifth largest vaccine-producing nation by 2025. We'll have more in our news briefing shortly. Meanwhile, Team Korea faces USA in baseball at the Tokyo Olympics, despite their semi-final loss to Japan on Wednesday. We'll cover the latest on Going for Gold. For this week's Korean Politics Digest, we'll go over the second TV debate between the DP presidential candidates and the former Prosecutor General Yoon Suk-yeol's decision to finally join the PPP last week. And then later we discuss some of the most popular food and drink pairings in Korea. That's for Explore Korea. We'll have all that and more coming up on today's Korea 24. South Korea continues to battle the fourth wave of the pandemic. President Moon Jae-in announced an ambitious plan for the nation to become one of the world's leading vaccine manufacturers in the next 4 years. To learn more about this plan and the rest of the day's headlines, we have joining us in the studio KBS World Radio News Editor Gu Hee-jin. Hee-jin, hello.
Hello, Jang-ho.
So President Moon said Thursday that South Korea aims to become a vaccine powerhouse by becoming the world's fifth largest vaccine-producing nation, and that's by 2025. Can you tell us more?
Yes, the government will designate vaccines along with semiconductors and batteries as one of three key national strategic technologies and invest 2.2 trillion won, or 1.8 billion US dollars in vaccines over the next 5 years. He also promised major tax breaks for vaccine-related research and development and facility investment to maximize domestic output through self-sufficient production of essential materials, components and equipment. President Moon also unveiled plans to bolster the sector by fostering scientists and experts in vaccines, clinical trials and biomedicine.
Now, this comes as South Korea reported its fourth highest daily infections to date, and the government will likely maintain the current level of social distancing protocols, even enforcing tougher measures in certain areas. This includes Daegu, a city that saw a massive outbreak during the first wave of the pandemic, and where now there's a sense of grim deja vu. So, Hee-jin, can you give us the latest figures and an update on the pandemic?
Yes, of course. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency on Thursday added 1,776 new cases, the fourth highest daily count to date, and 51 more than the previous day, raising the nation's cumulative total to 205,702. And as you mentioned, authorities are especially concerned about a cluster in Daegu, the epicenter for the first wave, after the Shincheonji Church congregation refused to adhere to distancing guidelines. The latest cluster was very similar, originating at a church in Suseong-gu, with sister churches in Donggu, Dalseogu, and another in Andong in North Gyeongsang Province. Members of the congregation at the church account for 75 out of 121 cases reported out of Daegu, some of them who have already tested positive for the Delta variant, and authorities are closing in on other members of the church. And the KDCA will likely report slightly lower numbers on Friday, as the daily tally reached 1,359 as of 6 p.m. on Thursday, 116 less than the previous day. This has prompted the government to review supplementary measures to the existing social distancing system, which may include a more structured approach to sharing information between local governments and enhancing their jurisdiction against quarantine violations. The government will also likely extend the highest level 4 protocols in the Greater Seoul metropolitan area and level 3 measures outside the capital region for an additional 2 weeks until August 22nd.
Moving on, let's turn to what will remain a concern even after the pandemic, climate change. The government announced several phased-out plans in its overall blueprint for the nation to become carbon-free by 2050. Can you outline the measures for us?
A presidential committee co-chaired by Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum on Thursday announced measures which will begin by partly maintaining reliance on existing energy sources such as coal and liquefied natural gas, while expanding the use of carbon capture, utilization and storage technology to recycle carbon emissions. This scenario is expected to cut greenhouse gas emissions to 15.4 million tons, down 96.3% from 2018. The next phase involves a shutdown of all coal-fired power plants while partly relying on LNG and transitioning to renewable energy and fuel cells. This will reduce emissions by 97.3%. And finally, the nation will completely eliminate gas emissions by suspending coal and LNG development while transitioning to green hydrogen technology. Greenpeace said high temperature areas in South Korea have more than doubled in the past 9 years due to climate change. The International Environment Agency said only 12% of South Korea's landmass saw temperatures exceeding 30 degrees Celsius back in 2002. However, such areas have expanded to cover 27% of the nation by 2019.
Yes, still business lobby groups remain sceptical about the government's ambitious goals, calling them vague and excessive, even though they do agree on the need to reduce carbon emissions.
Indeed. The Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry said Thursday that carbon neutrality is unavoidable, but conditions differ across sectors and firms, which was not taken into consideration in the government's latest plans. The Federation of Korea Industries also expressed concerns on the government's lofty goal, despite voicing support for the government's response to the global climate crisis. It warned that reckless emission reduction goals could cost jobs and global competitiveness. All three plans include nuclear energy taking 6.1 to 7.2% of the nation's total energy mix, a significant drop from the current 23.4% in 2018. The committee plans to collect opinions from various strata of businesses and society by September, before announcing a final plan in late October.
And finally, the Korean Bar Association launched an investigation into its members' use of legal aid mobile apps, hours after a new rule went into effect that bans them from offering legal services through such platforms. Can you tell us more?
Yes. In a statement on Thursday, the KBA said its disciplinary committee will take appropriate action in accordance with the revised regulations. The group said petitions have been filed against some 1,440 lawyers registered with the controversial app Law Talk and others, while some 500 were filed with the Seoul Bar Association. The KBA accuses the app operators of acting as illegal brokers and attempting to control the registered lawyers. With some 2,900 lawyers currently registered with Law Talk, its operator Law & Company, which claims the app is a legal advertising platform, pledged to support them should they be penalized. The company and the lawyers also filed an injunction with the Constitutional Court in June to stop the new rule from taking effect.
That'll be all for our news briefing. Thank you for those updates.
Thank you.
It's time now for our special daily update on Team Korea at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics in our segment Going for Gold. Our staff editor and special correspondent for this segment, Mark Wilson-Chair, joins us now in the studio for this roundup. Mark, hello. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
So we start today with a rather painful defeat by Team Korea. On Wednesday night, that's yesterday, the men's baseball team suffered a defeat at the hands of host nation Japan. It ended up 5-2. Mark, well, we'll get into the details of what went wrong in just a second, but as we have said several times previously in the segment, they aren't out of the competition yet, as this is a double elimination system. They are in fact playing as we speak, but walk us through what happened yesterday, Mark.
Jung-ho, what can you say? It is just a difficult pill to swallow. It just seemed our boys couldn't really figure out Japan's pitchers, and in the sixth, when we finally drew some blood with the pair of runs, we could have done so much more damage, but a string of strikeouts just ended that real quick. Throughout the night, we just had a really hard time getting on base. And then, when we're speaking of defense, at the bottom of the eighth, we were at 2-2. There was that tragic double play botch that would have ended the inning, but reliever Go Woo-suk's foot it couldn't find the bag. It subsequently led the bases to becoming loaded. After a double, Japan was ahead 5-2. We just couldn't catch up.
Right, it was just schoolboy errors. It was so frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Captain Kim Yeon-ju, he said that even in loss, it is a team effort. He said it didn't come down to a single player, and that as a squad, they just, quote, lost in every little detail. Kim also said that they felt a lot of pressure facing the Japanese pitchers for the first time, and that they'll have to shake things off earlier next time. And just like you talked about, there still can be a next time. We are not out of the gold race yet, but you sent me this message last night, Jung-ho. You said, well, it looks like we're going to have to take the long route. We will have to beat Team USA today in the repechage match, which could essentially be considered a second semifinals match to face Japan again for gold. If we do lose against Team USA, we'll still have a chance for a medal in the bronze medal match. But to quote the late, great MLB legend Yogi Berra, Jung-ho, it ain't over till it's over.
Yes, hopefully the team is just setting themselves up for a better comeback story, but the performance last night didn't fill me with hope. But we'll see how the game against USA finishes up. Let's move on to an event that we did do well in last night, and that's in sports climbing, namely the women's combined event. Mark, you've covered the event a few times in our show, especially before the men's combined event that happened Tuesday night. Sadly, the bouldering specialist Chun Jong-won didn't make it into the top 8 to move on to the men's finals, but it was a different story for Seo Chae-hyun, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. Now, before we get into the 17-year-old's awesome performance last night, I want to again emphasize how this event is a bit mad. It's essentially 3 events jam-packed into one, and these poor climbers, they have to do all 3 in a single night, not even in the day, Jung-ho, but at night. With that said, you can see that this event favors athletes who are skilled in endurance because 1, you're absolutely gassed by the time you hit the wall for the final discipline at 9 p.m., and 2, bouldering is a bit more endurance-based with bursts of power, and lead is just absolute endurance. So athletes heavily skilled in speed climbing, they had a very hard time in the latter 2 disciplines. Okay, so Seo Chae-hyun did not do great in speed climbing because, simply put, she is not a speed climber. She was all the way down at 17 out of 20 after that discipline. But for the second discipline, bouldering, she did a great job at solving and navigating the 4 problems, or essentially the 4 paths, and ended up in a very respectable 5th place. But it was in lead climbing that she showed her true power. In lead, you essentially need to climb up as high as you can up a 15-meter wall. I call it a wall, but it's almost like a cave because the top curves out towards the audience. It's, of course, incredibly difficult. And if you fall, that's it. So Seo, who is in fact born into a family of climbers, her father owns a climbing gym in Seoul, reached the highest point out of all the competitors and nearly made it to the top.
Right, we talk about how much endurance you need for these events, but she made it almost look easy during that last event, considering all the other events that she had to go through that day.
That's a really good point. The thing is, a lot of speed and bouldering specialists had a harder time in lead because all that muscle on top of muscle, it weighed them down. So, meanwhile, tips the scales at a whopping 48 kilograms. So she is light with incredible gripping strength. With a combined score of all 3 disciplines, Seo is now ranked at number 2 overall and is a legitimate medal contender. She's legit because the top 8 of these 20, they move on to the finals. So right now, she's essentially ranked 2 out of the 8 finalists. The women's final will be held on Friday, with speed climbing to begin at 5:30 p.m. Honestly, a lot of media, both here and abroad, it's not covering Seo right now a lot, but I'm sure they will if she takes a medal.
Of course, yes, indeed. For anyone who's been watching it, I'm sure they will agree it's a fascinating addition to the Olympics. I was very much engrossed watching it. And if Seoul does win a medal, then of course it will put sport climbing on the map for South Korea.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to the second round of the women's individual golf now. Yesterday we talked about how Team Korea golfers did fairly well, but really needed to pick things up today. Unfortunately, that didn't really happen. Some okay performances, but Korean players have fallen behind a bit. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, Team USA's Nelly Korda showed why she is currently number one in the world. She went an incredible 9 under today, finishing round 2 at 13 under par, 4 shots ahead of the rest of the field. It could have been an even bigger lead, but were it not for a bit of a hiccup there at the end on the 18th where she had a double bogey. Still, her performance today put her on top of the placings. Closest to her from Team Korea is Go Jin-young. She ended the day on 7 under par, so 6 shots off the lead, but only 2 off second place, so she's still within range of medal places. Kim Hyo-ju and Kim Se-young both are at 4 under and tied at 11th. But the defending champ, Park In-bi, she really had a hard time today. She only managed to shoot 1 below par today despite the inviting pin positions and is currently sitting 24th at 3 under. 2 more days to go, Jang-ho. It's quite tough at this point to chase Korda, but we shall see.
Right, as you said, 2 more days. We're only halfway there, but Korda has taken an impressive lead, and the Korean players will have to find their A game soon to be in
Real
position
soon. They're gonna, 2 more days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That carries on tomorrow, Friday, as well as the finals of the women's combined event in climbing, as we mentioned. What other events do we have to look out for tomorrow, Mark?
Well, in table tennis, we talked about this before. There's also the men's team bronze medal match tomorrow at 11 a.m., where Team Korea faces, you guessed it, Team Japan. And now we know the women's volleyball team will have to face the squad that handed their first loss of the games, Brazil, after Brazil defeated Team ROC last night. We knew we were going into the semifinals as the underdogs no matter who won last night's match, but now especially so against number 2 Brazil. Kim Young lead the women into a surprise victory tomorrow in the semifinals match. Jang-ho, that's not rhetorical. I'm asking you, can they, please? The entire country will be behind the squad come 9 p.m. Friday night.
Right, so that means we won't be covering it on our show tomorrow. We'll have to cover it on our show on Monday. I cannot wait to see what happens. As you said, I'm already on the edge of my seat.
Tomorrow night, especially with climbing and women's volleyball, it's going to be a 3-screen minimum for me after I go home, yeah.
Indeed. Okay, Mark, thank you for that roundup once again today for Going for Gold. We'll catch up with you again tomorrow.
Okay.
Welcome back as we carry on to our weekly segment, Korean Politics Digest, where we talk in depth about some of the major political issues in Korea with the help of our 2 expert guests. This week we dive into the second TV debate among presidential aspirants of the ruling Democratic Party. In addition, we discuss the leading opposition presidential contender Yoon Suk-yeol, who joined the main opposition People Power Party in a surprise move last week. To discuss these issues today, we have joining us on the line first, Affiliate Professor Kim Byung-ju from the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Professor Kim, hello, it's good to talk to you again.
Hi, thank you.
And we also have a law professor, Cho Hee-kyung from Hong University standing by on the line as well. Professor Cho, it's good to speak to you again.
Good to speak to you too.
So last week we talked about the first TV debate between the ruling Democratic Party presidential candidates. Yesterday, Wednesday, the second one took place on the local cable channel YTN. The 6 candidates are lawmaker Park Yong-jin, former Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun, former Justice Minister Chu Mi-ae, lawmaker Kim Do-kwan, but the leading 2 candidates are former Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun and Gyeonggi Governor Lee Jae-myung. Another range of topics were discussed, including political reform, recent political issues and what they pledged to do. But once again, it was the mudslinging that made headlines. Lee Jae-myung's DUI from 2004 is becoming the issue again, and Lee Na-kyun came under fire for perhaps not doing enough when he was party chair and prime minister. So, Professor Cho, what did you take away from the debate yesterday?
I think the general problem with these Democratic Party's debates is the general lack of interest on the part of the populace. So this second debate was also quite a civilized affair, I would say. And I think the organizers, this time it was the broadcaster YTN, went to a great deal of trouble to sort of try to make sure that there was a more of a constructive debate and not too much of mudslinging. But in the end, the focus and attention was actually on the sort of personal attacks and mudslinging among the candidates. There was some interesting discussions on various points and issues, but I thought the entire sort of the general discussions lacked a focus because the themes were too broad. And I think, as I suggested last time, it might be better, given that they are going to have a series of these debates, to actually pick one topic and really delve into it so that you can really see the differences and commonalities among the candidates.
Professor Kim, what did you make of last night's events?
In absolute sense, I agree with Professor Cho that it was not very fun or interesting to watch. Not as entertaining as I mentioned like last week as well. The thing is, but the relative sense, still, considering all these timing issues and so on, meaning that maybe this is not the time that candidates may want to or may not be prepared or ready to get into discussing very serious issues such as international relations, diplomacy, relationship with North Korea, real estate, and youth concerns, and so on. I understand that. They may not want to get into that, or they're just simply not ready in terms of details of those policies. But despite setting aside those considerations, I think a relative sense, and in a relative sense, particularly considering things are just not happening on the People's Power Party side, I appreciated a chance this time to learn about these candidates' views on political reform. For instance, several candidates talked about the need for the recall system of the lawmakers and the need to get rid of immunity in terms of, their behavior and words, lawmakers' words, and so on. I thought that was quite interesting. They talked about it, not to a serious manner, but, they still discussed those things. And then they talked about different ways of setting up the system for enhancing the ethical standards of the public officials and so on. Also, they discussed the idea of, popular idea that's pretty popular among the people here, the renewable 4-year term for presidency. So offering such chance to talk about those kind of issues through this kind of debate, I appreciated that. And so relative sense, I think it was still meaningful to have such chance in comparison with the complete inaction on the side of the opposition, for instance.
So, Professor Kim, you're focusing on the policies and substance that might have come out from yesterday, but it is the current infighting that is grabbing headlines, I would say, more among the media. Is that an issue, do you think? Do you have concerns about that?
Infighting is something, in my own mind, obvious, and they have to have a fight in order to have someone get ahead. And then Lee Jae-myung, for instance, the front runner, the Gyeonggi governor, has his liabilities, and also Lee Na-kyun, the I guess usually viewed as the second person in the race within the party competition. He has his own liabilities and so on. So it's time for them to have their issues to be laid out on the table, and I think talking about that was something that was necessary, and I didn't see as much of a problem there, if that's the point.
Professor Cho, would you agree that it's not too much of a problem, that this is just, for now, just a jostling to see who will represent the DP, and in the long run, it might not damage their prospects too much, especially, as you said, there is perhaps a lack of interest among the public at the moment?
Well, so far, because nothing really new has come out. I mean, the fact is, all of these candidates are people who have had numerous, high-level offices, and they have been, subject of fairly close scrutiny in the past as to their private lives and business dealings and family relations and all of that. So I think there's very few skeletons left in their cupboards, and if there are any, they're probably very deeply buried. So although there are, particularly among between the two leading candidates, there is a lot of mudslinging at each other. I don't think it's doing them too much damage. But having said that, I think there will come a point when the voters will become sick of all the candidates dragging up or dredging up things that happened like 14, 16 years ago, or sort of recalling the past misdeeds and missteps, and so they do have to watch out.
So I guess the Democratic Party itself, the leadership is very much mindful of that. So that's probably why at the second debate, the idea of the institutionalizing within the party the system of vetting the candidates, that was discussed, and most of the candidates were in favor, but Lee Jae-myung was not, and looks like the system, when it's set up, probably Lee Jae-myung will be the first target for this. And then it was quite interesting that Choo Mi-ae seems to be raising a doubt about the system, confirming the observation from the beginning that Choo Mi-ae is on the side of Lee Jae-myung. So overall, I thought that was very interesting development at the second debate.
I noticed that objection by Choo Mi-ae as well, because Jung Sek-yoon was the one who proposed this kind of verification team within the party to vet each of the candidates. And right at the end, he sort of said, "Oh, well, then I presume that all of you agreed to setting up this, verification team." And Choo Mi-ae said, "Oh, hang on, this is not something that we should just, decide within this debate. It needs more discussion at party level," which was a very good point. And so in this second debate, I think in terms of policy, there was actually more agreement than disagreement among the candidates. So when there was an objection or disagreement by a candidate, that kind of stood out. So even in terms of the National Assembly member recall system proposal, I think Kim Do-kwan actually objected to it, saying that, there is no other OECD country that kind of implements it. It exists at the provincial government level, and it's really ineffective. And so you shouldn't just, do something just because it's a popular move.
Well, the DP primary race continues. Let's switch over to the other side now. When we spoke last week, we were wondering when the leading candidate for the opposition bloc, former Prosecutor General Yoon Suk-yeol, would join the main opposition People Power Party, saying maybe he will try to leave it as late as possible and join sometime in August. And then later on Friday, a day after we spoke last week, in a surprise announcement, he officially joined the party. It was such a surprise, it seemed even his aides didn't know it would happen then. Yoon said that in order to achieve a change in administration, joining the opposition party to fairly compete in its primaries was the right thing to do. Yoon added that he said he believes he will attract broader voter support by joining the party. So, Professor Kim, what did you make of the timing of Yoon's party entrance? Why do you think he joined then?
Indeed, the timing was one of the interesting puzzles that we have seen so far in the process of this campaign or pre-campaign period. And I guess there were several factors here. That is, perhaps the numbers dropping in the polls may have increased the pressure on Yoon Suk-yeol. Any option he can come up with to slow down of the decline of the poll numbers. And this could be one, he might have thought. And then also on the relative sense, on the other side, the rise of Choi Jae-hyung, the former head of Board of Audit, as his numbers are rising in some of the polls, maybe Yoon Suk-yeol was a little bit desperate in terms of slowing the trend overall. But however, the manner under which this was done was still quite interesting and puzzling when the head of the party, Lee Jun-suk, was visiting Yeosu, and then the floor leader, Kim Ki-hyun, was on vacation. suddenly he did this, and then a lot of people are wondering. And observers, I guess, walked away with the impression that together with these strategic considerations of falling polls and the need to slow them down, also some kind of tension, personal emotion, if you will, was in play as well. The tension between Yoon Suk-yeol, the candidate, and then head of the party, Lee Jun-seok, and the rest of the leadership. So it was not as optimal, one would say, and observers all agreed that unlike the way Choi Jae-hyung, the former head of Board of Auditor, joined the party where Lee Jun-seok and everybody was there, and this time it was pretty odd, and so I don't think many people agree that it was the best optimal political move on the side of Yoon Suk-yeol, whatever the cause may be. Maybe, that's all because of his feeling toward Lee Jun-seok, whatever. So that was the observation, I guess.
Professor Cho, as Professor Kim said, this was a surprise announcement, but do you think this helps Yoon and the PPP now?
Well, it's certainly very helpful for the PPP, but whether it's actually helpful for Yoon Suk-yeol's candidacy, if his motivation was to stop the sliding poll numbers, he really should have planned it better to gain the maximum effect from the convention effect of him joining the party. Sort of announce it ahead so that, he occupies the headlines in the newspapers and media for some days before, leading up to his joining the party, and so have a big fanfare and, photographs of him smiling and Lee Jun-seok and shaking hands and, maybe being given flowers or something. But this was all really sudden, and I thought that it really showed up some of the worst of his personality traits. Things like obstinacy, pride, impetuosity, and some possibly even petulance, because Professor Kim mentioned that there might have been some personal emotions involved between Lee Jun-seok and Yoon Suk-yeol, and I think Yoon Suk-yeol basically realized the inevitability of him having to join the party sooner rather than later. But he had said himself that he would be joining sometime in August. But then all of a sudden he kind of overturns that and joins before July is out. Why did he do so? I think possibly the date was actually agreed between the two, maybe the 2nd or perhaps the 10th of August, but then it got leaked, and he might have felt that it would look as if he's bowing to the pressure that was being placed on him by Lee Jun-seok and the party to join PPP. And so he, I think, basically said, okay, if I joined, I'm going to do it on my terms. I'm going to choose the timing. And so he just did it. And it's really, it doesn't look like he consulted any of his close advisors even. He just simply went ahead and did it himself. And so that kind of behavior really concerns me if we are sort of looking at the potential leader of the country.
Well, it was certainly an interesting development, something that we have got into today. But that is where we're going to have to leave it for this week's Korean Politics Digest, as we are out of time. Professor Cho, Professor Kim, thank you once again for your time, and we'll speak to you again next week.
Thank you very much.
You.
Welcome to the Korea 24 Stock and Forex Update. The benchmark Korea Composite Stock Price Index fell 4.25 points, or 0.13% on Thursday, closing the day at 3,276.13. The tech-heavy Kosdaq rose, however, gaining 11.61 points, or 1.11%, to close at 1,059.54. On the foreign exchange, the local currency weakened 0.1 won against the dollar, ending the day at 1,143.71. You can check Korean stock and forex closings at world.kbs.co.kr.
Next up, it's Korea Trending, a daily roundup of some of the other news stories that have been trending online in Korea today. And bringing us those stories, we have Lee Ju-young joining us on the line today. Ju-young, hello. It's good to talk to you again.
Hello.
So we're going to go straight into our stories today. Ju-young, what do you have for us first?
All right. For our first story, so over 160 customers showed symptoms of food poisoning after eating the seaweed rice roll dish kimbap from two such shops from the same chain in Bundan district, located within Seongnam City in the Seoul metropolitan area. According to Seongnam City yesterday, as of 3:30 p.m. Thursday, 99 customers who bought kimbap from one of the two branches on July 29th suffered from food poisoning symptoms, including severe stomachache and diarrhea, as well as fevers up to nearly 40 degrees. 40 of them are reportedly hospitalized. And on August 1st, 70 other customers who bought kimbap from the other establishment showed similar symptoms as well, bringing up the total number to 169. However, given that over 4,200 rolls were sold to about 1,000 customers over the course of 5 days from the two branches, authorities fear that more food poisoning cases will occur. The kimbap brand operates about 30 branches in the Seoul metropolitan area.
Oh dear, so it looks like this is quite a serious case of mass food poisoning then. Do we know exactly how this happened?
A city official said that both branches seem to have had problems with ingredients, but it's difficult to confirm as they did not have any leftover food from what was sold at the time. So instead, they collected samples from cutting boards and utensils and have requested for a detailed epidemiological investigation. The test results are set to come out in about a week.
Has there been any response from the chain about the incidents?
Yes, there has. The chain apologized on their official social media today, saying that they're truly sorry for causing so much pain and damage, and that they would be willing to receive any punishment if the authorities see fit as soon as the results come out. They also added that they will not hide anything and that they promise to do their best to help everyone who was affected. The two branches under question have been closed since the beginning of this week.
Yes, well, this is very unfortunate indeed for the customers and those stores. Finding the cause fast will be important, not just to resolve the situation, but also to make sure that there aren't any further issues in these stores and other branches as well. Let's move on to our second story of the day now. What do you have for us?
A U.S. doctor has revealed the startling difference the COVID-19 vaccine can make in protecting our lungs against the virus. Dr. Gaston Kamel, director of the medical ICU at SSM Health St. Louis University Hospital, appeared on the local St. Louis station KSDK via video call and shared X-ray photos showing just how ravaged lungs can get when they're unprotected from the virus. He captured the difference in lung health between vaccinated and unvaccinated patients who both tested positive for COVID-19. Dr. Kamel, who has been treating thousands of infected patients, says that the demographic of the patients he has been treating recently is in their 20s, 30s, and 40s and are mostly unvaccinated.
I see. So the doctor showed one X-ray showing an unvaccinated patient who caught COVID-19 and the other showed someone who had been vaccinated. So that was a breakthrough case of COVID-19. So Ju-young, can you tell us more about what the X-rays showed exactly, what the difference was?
Sure. In the vaccinated patient's image, the lungs showed a dark area in the middle of them, indicating the space that is filled with air through breathing. This category of patients would, for the most part, not require intensive care unless they have pre-existing conditions or are immunocompromised. However, in the unvaccinated individual's image, the lung appears clouded with white, which Dr. Kamel explained could be bacteria, mucus, or secretions. These patients may require the ventilator or get intubated on medical ventilators or even on life support.
So it seems Dr. Kamel wanted to show how effective vaccines can be against the virus, even if there is a breakthrough case and you do catch COVID-19.
Right, exactly. He said that after 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, the recipient can enjoy a 96% effectiveness against hospitalization, and the AstraZeneca shot slashes the risk by 92% after 2 doses as well. Dr. Kamel hopes by sharing the images, he'll convince more people to get vaccinated as the Delta variant continues to spread across the U.S. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has warned that the Delta variant now makes up the majority of new cases in the U.S., and even fully vaccinated Americans are now encouraged to wear masks inside in certain high-risk areas of the country.
Right, so these X-rays are evidence that even if you are unlucky enough to catch COVID-19 after you've been vaccinated, you will still likely fare better than if you hadn't been vaccinated. So get vaccinated if you can. Let's move on to our last story of the day now. What do you have for us?
Hyorin and Tasom from the disbanded South Korean girl group Sister have teamed up for a new song. Contents Lab Vivo released at midnight today a teaser video of the artist's new song called Summer or Summer. The full song will be released on August 10th at 6 p.m. KST. The poster and the teaser video for the upcoming track shows Hyorin and Tasom wearing sunglasses and sleeveless tops, giving off a summer vibe.
Right, so this collaboration has fans excited. Before we get into the details of how this song came about, for those who might not be familiar with the artists, can you tell us a bit more about them?
Sure. As I mentioned, the two were part of the four-member girl group Sister, which debuted in 2010. They were popular for many of their summer dance hits like So Cool, Shake It, Touch My Body, and Loving You, but have disbanded in 2017. Hyorin then went on to establish a one-person agency and continued her solo activities like songwriting, producing, and composing. Tasom, on the other hand, took on acting, taking on lead roles in various dramas and movies like Band of Sisters, He is Psychometric, and Was It Love?
Okay, so what brought them back together again?
Hyorin and Tasom's collaboration is part of a year-long project called How to Have a Good 2021, launched by Vivo, where the two have agreed to participate as the August personalities of the month. The project aims to not only uplift many people in the country going through a hard time in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also financially help those who are suffering, as the two will donate all their proceeds from the song. The project features other celebrities like girl group ITZY, comedian Kim Shin-young's alter ego second aunt Kim Da-bi, and actor Lamiran as well.
Yes, that's all we have time for on today's Korea Trending. Chi-young, thank you for those stories, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
It's time for our weekly segment, Explore Korea, where we journey across the peninsula discovering more about the country's rich history, culture and travel highlights. Joining us this week is Hannah Roberts from the blog Moonbear Travel. Hannah, hello, it's great to speak to you again.
Hi, nice to talk to you too.
So what are we talking about this week, Hannah?
Okay, so this week I want to introduce you to some of Korea's most famous food and drink pairings.
I see. So we're talking about food, more specifically about famous food and drink pairings. So why are we talking about this today, Hannah? What's special about Korean food and mealtime culture?
Okay, so I think you and I can both agree that Korea has an incredibly strong food and drink culture, right?
Indeed, yes.
Most countries do. You know, food and drink is what brings people together. It nourishes us and makes us strong and healthy. But Korea's food culture is especially strong, I think. For as long as we can imagine, Korean people have believed that food and drink are the root of health and sickness. And also, kind of along those lines, you know, that food and medicine do the same things. They heal us and they make us feel better or make us feel good. Additionally, food hasn't always been and still isn't always abundant in Korea. Of course, the upper classes have always eaten well, but for the average person in Korea, food has sometimes throughout history been scarce. And you know how we usually ask people how they are in Korean? We don't say, how are you? We don't say, are you okay, right? We say, 밥 먹었어요? Did you eat? You know, this comes from, it comes from history, you know, the fact that if you had food, you were okay. You were in a good situation.
Right, that is a phrase I've heard very often throughout my life.
Right. And then on top of all of that, you know, food is a very uri activity in Korea. Uri meaning us, you know. It brings family and friends together, even more so than food usually does for people in the West. Usually meals in Korea, they're enjoyed as a group, all eating the same thing from the same dishes. You'll often have one big main dish in the middle of the table with all the side dishes around it. You know, everyone's reaching over and around and under everyone else to get at the food. Everyone's having the same thing, you know, enjoying the same flavors and smells, having the same experience. So, you know, you can sum it up in the food in Korea brings health, it signifies wealth, and it's a recipe for happiness. Things I think we can agree are pretty important in life.
Sure, I think that is a good summary of the culture here. Eating is so important for Korean people. I would say we obsess over it. So let's talk about food pairings then. And this first pairing is one that has become very popular, especially in recent years, even overseas, as it was popularized through Korean dramas, so much so that it's probably one of the first pairings that people will think when talking about Korean food and drink combos. And I'm sure it's been very popular in recent weeks as well with people at home watching the Olympics, Hannah.
That's right, yeah. My first suggestion, like you said, is arguably the most famous of all the pairings, and it's fried chicken and beer. Okay, I'm going to set the scene for you now. It's a warm summer evening. There's a light breeze, and the sun is slowly setting behind a bridge, stretching across the Han River. Now you have a can of beer in one hand and a piece of Korean fried chicken in the other. Is that not the best feeling?
Yes, I've definitely been there. Sounds like a familiar scene.
Yes. People often say that Korean fried chicken is some of the best in the world. It's made with small chickens, so the meat is more tender and the coating is thinner and crispier than what we might get in other countries. But despite being lighter and crispier, it's still greasy from the frying. So a nice Korean lager, which are usually lighter and more carbonated than those from other countries, that's just perfect to cut that kind of heavy, kind of oily feeling of the chicken. It's the classic dish to eat sat outside by the Han River in Seoul, so much so that there are designated spots at the river parks for fried chicken delivery. And like you said as well, lots of people like to eat Korean chicken and beer at sports events. So the thing is, though, it has alcohol as a pairing. So if you're not a drinker, the next best thing to having beer with your chicken is the pickled radish cubes that always come with the chicken delivery. So, both people can enjoy it.
Of course. Chicken and beer, also known as chimek, affectionately here in Korea. People have been enjoying chimek for some time. It's become a sort of quintessential experience for those visiting as well. And the summer months are perfect to enjoy it, as long as the beer is icy cold, of course.
Definitely.
Right. What other pairings do you have for us today as well, Hannah?
Okay, next up is definitely my favorite of my list. That's jeon and makgeolli. So jeon is a savory pancake filled with foods like kimchi or seafood and chive, or that you can get them made with potato. But the group of jeon foods also includes a different kind of jeon, they're like smaller foods, but kind of bite-sized almost, and they're pan-fried in flour and egg. And that includes lots of different things like pumpkin or beef, mixed vegetables. You can even get spam and spicy pepper jeon.
Right, it's obviously very popular and part of the traditional table here in Korea. But what do we pair that with?
That's right. It's like you said, it's a traditional food. So unlike the fried chicken, which is not very traditional, the jeon has a very classic partner, and that is makgeolli. Makgeolli is a fermented rice wine that's been strained so that the rice has been taken out. It does have quite a particular flavor, so I've kind of found that it's not very popular with everyone who tries it, who visits Korea. And if people do like it, it's taken them quite a while for them to get used to the flavor. That same goes for me, actually. I never used to like it, but now I love it. And makgeolli comes in all sorts of varieties, though. You can get it made with chestnut or with peanuts. Some even have fruit flavors added in, like you can get a tangerine or orange makgeolli from Jeju Island, which is famous for its oranges. Or sometimes there are types of makgeolli made with the flavor of the moment. Like a few years ago, I think there was a popular peach variety.
Right, yeah. I think people go for those, as you said, who might be put off by regular makgeolli. I think some people find the cloudy complexion perhaps a little bit off-putting, and there's a tanginess to it that some people are surprised by. But I think once most people get used to it, they do fall for it, and there's such a variety of makgeolli out there as well. When you get traditional makgeolli, no two makgeollis are the same, so it's really about enjoying those different rawness of the makgeolli. But with jeon, I think it's more safe to say that more people overall like jeon.
Definitely, yes. The really good thing about John is that it's usually suitable for people with dietary restrictions. You know, sometimes the big pancakes don't often include egg, and there are so many fillings for the John to choose from that there will usually always be something for someone to eat. You should check before you order them, though, because some places use egg and some places don't use egg. But besides, they're so simple to make that the chef can probably always take out something if you ask them to do that when you order it.
Indeed. So typically you will find makgeolli and chon together in restaurants as well. So it's something that many people here crave for on rainy days as well.
That's right.
That is the pairing with the weather. Let's talk about one more before we go. What else is on your list?
Last on my list is perfect for summer, and that is naengmyeon and kalbi. So naengmyeon is a cold noodle dish, and it's a staple for the summer, like I said. The noodles come in different varieties. They can be made from flour or potato starch or buckwheat. And that last one, the buckwheat noodles, they're the most popular usually. They're served in a bowl of crushed ice, and they can be topped with a cold, tangy broth. And that's what you call 물 naengmyeon, the 물 meaning the water, right? Or you can have it topped with a spicy sauce, and that's called bibimbap naengmyeon. You'll often get some cucumber and sesame seeds and a boiled egg on top. And some of them even come with a few slices of meat on top too. Now, 물냉면 actually comes from Pyongyang in North Korea. It originates there, and you can see lines down the street from the most famous Pyongyang-style cold noodle restaurants in Seoul all summer. But I haven't told you about the perfect partner for naengmyeon.
Okay.
And that is kalbi. Kalbi is a rib meat, and it's usually marinated and grilled in a kind of sweet, almost barbecue-like sauce, but not so thick, right? It's, everyone loves a hot and cold food combination, like apple pie and ice cream. And the cold, tangy, fresh taste of the naengmyeon goes really perfectly with the soft, hot kalbi meat. And you have to try it if you're in Korea during the summertime.
Yes, definitely. As you said, naengmyeon is a dish that was said to be widely enjoyed by people in regions that is now North Korea. But when the Korean War broke out, many people left their hometowns and brought their food culture with them. And now naengmyeon is a menu that you can find pretty much in every Korean barbecue restaurant. And it's definitely a favorite of mine too. Naengmyeon and kalbi. Hannah, you've made me absolutely famished today. I can't wait to go home and have dinner now. So I'm going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you for sharing the popular food pairings with us today, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Thank you. Bye.
And that will be all for our show today. Tomorrow we have our Friday edition of the show with our regular segments, Weekly Economy Review and Movie Spotlight, along with your daily news updates. So we hope you join us for that. In the meantime, thank you for staying with us. I've been your host, Kwon Jang-ho, and we hope you have a great day. Goodbye.